Greetings to all who walk in divine awareness. To those chosen for such a time as this, your presence here is no accident. When one awakens to their true spiritual authority, the very atmosphere around them begins to shift. This is not mere transformation. It is a divine disruption, a sacred reclaiming. And in that wake, the murmurs begin. Not from the heavens, but from the shadows of old conversations. Suddenly, your name is spoken not with honor, but with hesitation, not because you've faltered, but because you've risen. And the familiar no longer recognizes the refined. They say, "You've changed." But have you truly changed, or have you simply remembered who you've always been? What if your elevation is not a departure, but a return to your original calling? Indeed, you have changed. But more than that, you have stepped into a new timeline, one authored by divine will, not public opinion. You have reclaimed authority over a life long watched, long weighed down by energies never meant to stay. If these words speak to your spirit, I invite you to comment 777, the number of spiritual completion and divine alignment. Let it be a public declaration that you are no longer who they remember, and more than they ever imagined. And to each of you who has supported this message through your heartfelt super thanks, I offer my deepest and most sincere gratitude. Your generosity sustains not only this platform, but the sacred mission behind it. Thank you. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, why does your peace disturb them more than your pain ever did? Why does your clarity spark confusion in others? Why are the very ones who once encouraged you now silent in the face of your breakthrough? As we prepare to enter the heart of this message, allow me to say this: their unease is not your burden. Their confusion is not your crisis. What if it's not pride that they're reacting to, but the purity of your alignment? This is not about ego. It is about alignment, and what happens when heaven's design disrupts human expectation. Let us begin. God's chosen ones, new timeline, new authority. Now everyone's saying, "You've changed." You, God's chosen one, have not truly changed. You have simply dismantled a false identity, one that may have comforted others but never reflected your true essence. That version of you, so familiar, so easy for them to digest, was never the real you. We learn early how to wear masks, to smile when it hurts, to stay quiet when we want to speak. These masks become our survival, costumes stitched together from years of conditioning, guilt, people-pleasing, and conflict avoidance. That old self. It nodded when boundaries were broken, laughed at jokes that wounded, tolerated relationships that drained the soul. But what if that version was never meant to endure? As it is written, "Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices." Colossians 3:9. And now here you are, no longer performing, no longer pretending. How does it feel to lay down what was never truly yours? To let go of patterns that once protected you, but now only limit you? Scripture speaks again. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12:2. This is not about becoming someone new. This is about remembering who you were before the world taught you to forget. It is the sacred return, the internal revolution, a shift from tolerance to truth, from approval to alignment, from pretending to peace. And as you rise in truth, your relationships may begin to tremble, not because you've become unloving, but because you've stopped shrinking. As it is declared, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. 2 Corinthians 5:17. So let me ask you now, are you beginning to see it? That the new has always been within you, waiting for permission to emerge. Consider the example of Maya Angelou, a poet, a warrior of truth, and a voice that rose from silence. Though she endured deep pain and long seasons of stillness, she emerged to speak her story with power. She once said, "There's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." Perhaps you too have known that inner ache, and now feel the weight of silence lifting as you begin to honor your authentic voice. Like Maya, you are stepping into your God-given power, not by demanding attention, but by refusing to remain hidden or diminished. I think of Marcus, a man I know who, not long ago, found himself entangled in this same struggle. He was the emotional caretaker, the dependable peacemaker, the one who dimmed his own light to help others feel comfortable. But something within him began to stir. Inspired by Elijah, who stood boldly before King Ahab and the prophets of Baal, Marcus found the courage to stop setting himself on fire just to keep others warm. How often do we forget that our own flame must be tended first? Even Jesus withdrew from the crowd to restore his spirit. As Scripture says, "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." Luke 5:16. Imagine the liberation of no longer performing, like a butterfly breaking free from its chrysalis, flying not merely to survive, but to thrive. Of course, this transformation unsettles those around you. Have you noticed how resistant people become when you stop being the predictable, easy-to-handle version they once preferred? Pope Francis reminds us that authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. So the question now is, are you ready to become who you truly are, even if it disrupts their expectations? And when the pushback comes, as it often does, remember this sacred reassurance. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:10. Let that promise anchor you. Know this, your transformation didn't harm anyone. It simply revealed how they had quietly benefited from your silence, your availability, your emotional labor. You're no longer here to be their therapist, their scapegoat, their savior, or the background character in their story. So how does it feel to finally say no, not out of rebellion, but out of reverence for your soul? You are not cold. You are not cruel. You've simply stopped burning out to keep others comfortable. Picture yourself now like a tree planted by streams of living water, unshaken by the winds of expectation. But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. Jeremiah 17:7. Are you ready to trust that strength, not just around you, but within you? This is your divine calling. You are the chosen one, standing now in the fullness of your God-given power and truth. What new paths might unfold when you walk boldly as your true self, no longer confined by the shadows of who others wanted you to be. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a future and a hope. Jeremiah 29:11. Will you step into that hope today, not the version they expected, but the one heaven designed? Because here's the truth, the whispers of "you've changed" are often not about change at all, they're about control. What they really mean is, you're no longer manageable. Have you ever asked yourself why some people cling so tightly to the version of you that shrank just to make them feel taller? The one who apologized for simply existing, who bent and twisted to avoid rejection. But was that ever truly you? That version was a performance, a carefully constructed survival tactic shaped to soothe others' insecurities while slowly suffocating your soul. Now, the version of you that has emerged is raw, rooted, and unapologetically real. How does it feel to stand, finally, in your truth, unmasked and unbent? The scripture reminds us, He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147 verse 3. Could it be that your soul had to pass through fire and storm, not to return to smallness, but to emerge stronger, brighter, unshakable? Why settle for a watered-down version of yourself when God calls you to fullness? Some may struggle to accept this new reality, not because it's wrong, but because they only ever knew the diluted you. So let them speculate, let them wonder, let them talk. There is power in your silence, not passive but potent, as they wrestle with a transformation they can no longer control. Let me tell you about Anna, a young mother I once met. For years, she lived as a caretaker of everyone's comfort but her own. She sacrificed her dreams to keep the peace, smiled through exhaustion, said yes when her soul screamed no, and buried her voice beneath layers of responsibility. But something in her shifted. After months of quietly carrying the weight, Anna realized she could no longer live in the shadows of others' expectations. Her faith led her to the words of Isaiah, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary." Isaiah 40:31. And so she rose, slowly at first, then steadily, setting boundaries, speaking truth, honoring her worth. The reactions were mixed. Some resisted, some recoiled. But Anna felt free, not because the world changed, but because she did. And so I ask you, what would happen if you too chose to soar instead of shrink? Think about Frederick Douglass, the former slave and fierce abolitionist who refused to be confined by others' expectations. He said, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress." His life reminds us that liberation is never granted without resistance. And yet, how often do we forget that true change disrupts the comfortable illusions others hold about us? Have you realized that you did not endure internal battles just to stay likable to those who preferred the fake you? The truth is, you collapsed the identity they could manipulate. And now you walk in freedom, inner truths they cannot touch. Take a moment to reflect. How does that liberation resonate deep within your spirit? This is not arrogance. This is freedom. As Romans 8:21 declares, that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. You did not change. You finally showed up, fully and authentically. Now the question becomes, are you ready to step into this freedom and let go of the need to fit in or shrink yourself to blend? Because the real you has come to shift the atmosphere, to transform the room, to make an impact. What will you do with this calling? Picture a mighty oak tree, no longer bending to the whims of passing winds, but standing tall, unshakable, rooted in purpose and truth. You are that oak. As Isaiah 61:3 promises, God gives a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. So now ask yourself, how will you walk boldly in this new identity today? There comes a moment, sacred, irreversible, when you stop asking for permission to be everything God created you to be. That moment is now. You, God's chosen one, have stepped into a timeline that no longer waits for approval. This new chapter of your life, divinely written, not humanly drafted, doesn't seek permission to be radical. You are no longer pausing at the door of other people's comfort before stepping into your own destiny. You're not asking, "Is this okay?" before taking up space that was heaven ordained for you in the first place. And have you noticed? The air feels different when you're no longer shrinking. You're not here to whisper your breakthrough. You are not tiptoeing anymore. You're walking in full steps, steady and unapologetic, into a future that no longer carries the weight of others' expectations. The righteous are bold as a lion. Proverbs 28:1. So ask yourself, Does your spirit now recognize that boldness is not rebellion, but obedience? There was a time when you made yourself small to make others feel big. You dimmed your fire so they wouldn't feel the heat. You dulled your voice so it wouldn't echo too loudly in insecure hearts. You softened your ambition, diluted your insight, hid your light, all in the name of keeping the peace. But why did you think your passion was too much, your clarity too sharp, your presence too intense? What made you believe that who you were, in full expression, was something to be managed rather than embraced? But now, you know exactly what you carry. You've tasted your own power and remembered it came from God, not the applause of the crowd. Let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Matthew 5:16. Could it be then that your light was always meant to stretch further than the room could contain? You've outgrown explaining your soul to people who only speak in the language of survival. What do you say to those who can't understand a destiny birthed in prayer, shaped in fire, and released by grace? You're no longer handing over your power for the sake of keeping the room calm. You're done negotiating with fear, mediocrity, or ego just to make others feel safe. Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Galatians 1:10. Has your heart finally accepted that divine instruction doesn't require a second opinion? Let me tell you about Viola Davis, an Academy Award-winning actress and producer, known not just for her talent, but for her fearless authenticity. She once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are." She stopped shrinking, stopped apologizing for being powerful and black and female, in an industry that tried to define her limits. And what happened when she stopped waiting for permission? She built a legacy, just like you're doing now. And then there's Alea, a woman I met last year. She worked for a corporate consulting firm, brilliant and insightful, but constantly told she was too intense, too spiritual, too ambitious. So for years, she dulled her light just to stay agreeable. But something shifted. After a silent retreat and countless nights crying out to God, she quit overnight, enrolled in theology school, and started building a platform helping young women hear the voice of God for themselves. No announcement, no permission, just alignment, and peace flooded in like a river. Her steps today aren't loud, but they are thunderous in the spirit. Sound familiar? What you've stepped into now isn't a motivational trend or a personal decision. It's divine instruction. You are no longer walking with permission, you are walking with purpose. And understand this, that divine instruction, it offends the stagnant, confuses the average, and terrifies the controlling. Why? Because when God moves, nothing stays still. Your obedience disrupts systems, disarms manipulation, and dismantles expectations. You have become a living sign of the supernatural. When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all the truth. John 16:13. So ask yourself, could it be that your steps are no longer random but revelation in motion? So now, as you take up your space and walk unapologetically into everything God promised, what fear can hold you? What voice can stop you? What system can box you in? You're not walking to be understood. You're walking to be obedient. And obedience is always enough. Let's be clear. Radical doesn't mean loud. It means real. It means trusting yourself so deeply that you stop waiting for someone else to agree. But what does it take to trust yourself in a world that constantly demands you soften your edges? How many times have you second-guessed your spirit just to fit into rooms that never saw your fullness? It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. Psalm 118, verse 8. There comes a moment when your spirit simply refuses to negotiate with limitation anymore. It means knowing when it's time to walk away, not with drama, but with clarity, like a tide pulling back from the shore, not in anger, but because it knows the moon is calling it elsewhere. Have you ever felt that gentle nudge in your spirit, whispering, "It's time," even when no one else understood, just like Abraham, who obeyed and went even though he did not know where he was going? Hebrews 11:8. And yes, it means making decisions that might make people question your sanity until they see the results. Because what if obedience to God will always look like rebellion to the systems of man? For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. Isaiah 55:8. Then suddenly you're brave and inspiring. But let's be honest, that label only arrives after resistance. They only call you radical when they can't control you. When you begin to honor your instincts more than their opinions, you become unpredictable to their system. And anything they can't predict, they try to label as too much, off, or simply changed. But here's the truth. You're not changing, you're returning to the original blueprint of who you were before the world taught you to tone it down. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Jeremiah 1:5. So pause for a moment and consider this. What if the version of you that once felt too intense was actually the clearest reflection of your divine assignment? You were taught, with regard to your former way of life, to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Ephesians 4:22-24. Have you finally started to see yourself the way God sees you? Because in this new reality you've stepped into, being unapologetic isn't just a bold choice, it's a sacred requirement. You didn't come here to repeat cycles, to water yourself down, or to keep begging for access to rooms your soul has already outgrown. We were therefore buried with him through baptism into death, in order that, just as Christ was raised from the dead, we too may live a new life. Romans 6:4. No, you came here to rewrite rules, to break patterns, and to walk fully in your assignment. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor, to set the oppressed free. Luke 4:18. So the question now is, how long will you keep knocking on doors that God already told you to walk past? Let me offer a real-world example. Steve Jobs, the visionary behind Apple. At one point he was called arrogant, intense, and unmanageable. He was even ousted from his own company. But during his time away, he didn't shrink, he refined. And when he returned, he didn't ask for permission to innovate. He brought with him the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone. Now the world calls him a genius, but before the results showed, they just called him radical. Sound familiar? And then there's Chloe, a baker who played it safe for years. She stuck to classic pastries and well-worn recipes, doing just enough to keep her business afloat. But deep down, she had bigger dreams, bold flavors, experimental pairings, and desserts that told stories. One day, something shifted. She stopped asking if she was too much and started trusting her creative instinct. At first, some of her regular customers left, unable or unwilling to embrace the change. But over time, a new, loyal group of clients began to gather. People who resonated with her authenticity and celebrated her innovation. Her bakery didn't just survive, it steadily grew. And with that growth came a quiet, powerful lesson. Choosing alignment over approval always bears fruit. Because this isn't just a new version of you emerging, this is you with spiritual clearance and internal backing. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. Psalm 37:23. You're not waiting for permission anymore. If God is for us, who can be against us? Romans 8:31. You are the permission. People say you've changed, but what really happened runs far deeper than any surface-level shift. Have you ever wondered why some people are so quick to label your growth as change, as if you became a stranger overnight? Perhaps it's not that you changed, but rather that you stopped performing in a role that was never truly yours to begin with. What if the truth is that you simply laid down a script handed to you, one written by others for their own comfort? You were not just in their life, you were cast in a specific role to make their story easier to manage. Maybe you were the dependable one, the quiet peacekeeper, the perpetual yes who never stirred the waters. Or maybe you were the emotional sponge, silently absorbing their insecurities without complaint. Have you ever noticed how easy it was for others to fit you into a tidy little box? The Bible reminds us, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." Ephesians 4:29. And yet, how many masks have you worn just to survive? As long as you stayed in that role, they were comfortable. You were predictable, familiar, easy to control. But then something stirred inside. You began to awaken. You stopped performing. What was it that finally made you stop saying yes when everything in you wanted to say no? What gave you the courage to begin asking, "Is this really who I am?" In that moment of honesty, you found the strength to stop rescuing others at the expense of your own soul. And suddenly, their comfort turned to discomfort. Not because you became difficult or toxic, but because you no longer fit the script they had written for you. What they called change is, in reality, your refusal to continue pretending. Have you noticed how uneasy people become when you refuse to be who they expect? This isn't rebellion, it's revelation. You didn't flip the script to be defiant. You simply realized there was a script all along, and it was never yours. Put off your old self and be renewed in the spirit of your minds. Ephesians 4:22-23. So when did it finally become clear that it was time to stop playing their game? The version of you they liked was a carefully edited character, filtered through your fear of rejection and a desperate hunger for acceptance. But now that you've reclaimed your true self, they don't know how to respond. You're no longer acting the way the character would. You've stepped off the stage, and in doing so, left them lost in a story that can't continue without your compliance. And here's the hard truth. They never truly knew you. They only knew the version of you that negotiated with their expectations, the one who bent and broke just to survive their version of love, friendship, or family. Now, confronted with someone unfiltered and unshaped by their needs, they find themselves afraid. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:9. Have you felt that fear radiating from others when you finally stood in your truth? This unsettling response isn't about you. It's about the foundation of their story, one built on your compliance, beginning to crack. They weren't prepared for your strength. You didn't change. You simply stopped playing the character that kept their dysfunction intact. And now, in living as your authentic self, you reveal a truth they can no longer deny. They never had a relationship with your soul, only with your silence. Consider Oprah Winfrey, one of the most influential voices of our time. For years, she was seen as the nice talk show host, always agreeable, always comforting. Yet beneath that familiar presence was someone who never stopped evolving. Oprah dared to ask difficult questions, to confront uncomfortable truths, and most importantly, to be unapologetically herself. Though some accused her of changing, the reality is she was simply shedding the roles others tried to confine her to. By stepping fully into her authenticity, she didn't just transform her own life, she inspired millions and helped reshape an entire culture. What roles have you shed in your own life to find your true voice? To bring it closer to everyday life, think about Michael, a mid-level manager who always said yes to every extra task, hoping to be seen as the reliable team player. At first it worked. but over time, the constant pressure wore him down. He began to see how deeply he was sacrificing his own well-being just to maintain an image others expected. Then came a shift. One day, Michael began setting clear boundaries, still respectful, still kind, but firm in protecting his time and energy. His co-workers were shocked. Some even said he had changed. But in truth, Michael was finally showing up as himself, and in doing so, he found more clarity, energy, and perhaps most unexpectedly, respect. Have you experienced a moment like Michael's, where saying no was the first step toward reclaiming yourself? This process of transformation, whether public like Oprah's or personal like Michael's, often begins quietly, like a seed buried deep beneath the soil. For a long time, it appears still, invisible, maybe even forgotten. But beneath the surface, something powerful is happening. The seed is gathering strength, drawing from the dark earth. And then, one day, it breaks through, not to impress anyone, but to grow, tall, rooted and fully alive in its own timing. What freedom might you discover if you stopped holding yourself captive to expectations that no longer serve your growth? So now, pause for a moment and reflect. Where are you still holding on to the role they cast for you? What parts of your story have you been quietly rewriting in your heart, waiting for the courage to live them out loud? The truth is, freedom awaits. Not when you meet their expectations, but when you stop performing and finally start living as the real you. After stepping fully into your authentic self and shedding the roles that no longer served you, a profound shift began to unfold. Without making a scene or seeking validation, you gained something far more powerful than attention. You gained authority. It arrived quietly, the moment you withdrew your consent from every energetic lie that once held you captive. Have you ever noticed how true power often speaks in whispers rather than in loud declarations? This wasn't authority claimed by force or volume, but by the simple, unwavering refusal to participate in narratives that dishonored your soul. You stopped feeding relationships built on guilt. You no longer agreed to dynamics that felt like spiritual contracts signed under pressure rather than from genuine choice. And in doing so, you began to understand a deeper truth. Real freedom often begins not with rebellion, but with peace. What does it mean to truly say no? Not from anger, but from alignment. When was the last time you honored yourself enough to walk away, not with fury, but with sacred self-respect? Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. Galatians 6:7. So ask yourself, are you sowing seeds that nurture your soul, or ones that slowly drain your spirit? That quiet act of refusal changed far more than your outward behavior. It restructured your entire energetic presence, no longer playing small so others could feel large, no longer negotiating your worth in rooms that demanded your silence. You began to radiate something unmistakable: truth. Is your inner voice now louder than the noise of expectations around you? Because this was never about rebellion, it was something holier. A quiet, sacred revolt, rooted not in defiance, but in clarity. You weren't chasing a crown. You were uncovering the authority that had always belonged to you, hidden beneath layers of conditioning, performance, and emotional debt. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. Proverbs 2:6. When did you first hear that inner wisdom calling you, softly, unmistakably, back to your rightful place? Consider Eleanor, a graphic designer who for years said yes to every unreasonable request at work, fueled by a fear of rejection or conflict. Day by day, the weight of compliance wore down her creativity and drained her spirit. But slowly, something within her shifted. She began to set clear yet gentle boundaries, no longer agreeing to take on projects that depleted her energy. Her colleagues were surprised and, as often happens, whispered that she had changed. Yet within months, her work flourished and her joy returned. Eleanor hadn't become less kind or less capable. She had simply begun to honor her worth. What boundaries might you be avoiding that could unlock new levels of freedom and fulfillment? Now, reflect on the journey of Ellen DeGeneres, a beloved television host and comedian who faced profound challenges and public rejection before embracing her authentic self. Ellen didn't gain her influence by conforming to expectations. She rose by standing firm in her truth, even when the cost was high. Her refusal to hide or diminish herself ignited a wave of courage in others, reminding us that authenticity is often the most radical form of leadership. How might your story inspire others when you choose to stand firm in your truth? As you began to establish those invisible yet unmistakable boundaries, ripple effects were set into motion. Shock waves moved through old agreements, karmic loops, and soul contracts that never truly aligned with your divine purpose. People didn't fall away because you rejected them. They drifted because those expired dynamics could no longer hold without your energy propping them up. Can you see how some relationships survive only as long as you keep breathing life into them? I will walk about in freedom, for I have sought out your precepts. Psalm 119:45. What truths are setting you free today? Your presence began to change. You started to walk with a clarity that unsettled others, not because you claimed superiority, but because you were finally free. No longer tethered by invisible expectations, you stopped seeking approval, fully aware of the high price it once demanded. The authority you carry now didn't arrive with noise or conflict. It came quietly, with the peace that follows when you no longer sell your soul in fragments. Picture sunlight breaking through dense clouds, not with thunder, but with quiet, steady brilliance. It does not force its way in, it simply appears, and everything it touches is warmed and illuminated. How might your steady, unwavering clarity be lighting up spaces that once felt unreachable? They are not angry at your growth, they are shaken, because you reclaimed jurisdiction over your soul, and without your consent, they no longer have access. You didn't just evolve, you dismantled the entire old system. You rose, not by force, but by alignment. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. James 1:25. So ask yourself, what chains are breaking as you step fully into your authority? And when the chains started to break, it wasn't chaos, it was clarity. The ground didn't shake, but your vision sharpened. So why do they panic now that you're finally walking free? What is it about your freedom that unsettles them so deeply? Could it be that the grip they once held, the unspoken control, is slipping quietly through their fingers? They can't handle you now, not because you've become unkind, but because you're no longer predictable or pliable. You used to be someone they could figure out. You'd shrink when tension rose, soften your words to avoid conflict. Second-guess your truth to protect someone else's ego. You were easy to manage because you lived on edge, always reading the room before listening to your own instincts. But not anymore. How many years did you trade peace for approval? How often did you silence your soul just to keep the atmosphere pleasant? When was the last time you stood firm in your truth, even when the room grew cold with judgment? Now, you move from a place they don't recognize, a place rooted in sovereignty, not survival. A space that doesn't ask for permission, popularity, or precedent. You've stopped operating from fear and started responding from frequency. Your decisions don't have to make sense to them. They only have to resonate with your spirit. The fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. Proverbs 29:25. What does it mean to trust so deeply that you're no longer governed by other people's fears? Are you ready to honor that quiet voice within, the one that speaks above all noise? You're no longer living in reaction to their moods, manipulation, or expectations. You're listening to something higher now. You're following a deeper knowing, and that makes you unpredictable to people who only feel safe when they can control the outcome or the person. So what happens when obedience to God becomes more important than acceptance from people? What opens up in your life when pleasing others is no longer the measure of your worth? Think of a kite. The same wind that once felt like resistance is now what lifts it higher. You've become like that, no longer resisting pressure, but rising with it. Not to escape, but to soar in alignment. Let me tell you about Malik. For years, he was the emotional caretaker of his family, the fixer, the peacekeeper, the one everyone leaned on without ever asking how he was doing. But one day, Malik made a different choice. He stopped responding to every late-night crisis. He laid down the burdens that were never his to carry. He chose stillness over sacrifice. At first they called it selfish, but in truth, it was sacred. He didn't burn the bridge. He just stopped setting himself on fire to keep it lit. Have you ever noticed how those closest to you begin to struggle when you stop playing the role they assigned you? Why does your awakening feel like a threat to their comfort? Why does your clarity shake what they once called connection? Even those who once praised your gentle nature may now flinch at your boundaries. They called you kind when you were quiet, agreeable, and compliant. But the moment you began honoring yourself, something shifted. It's a truth that repeats itself across countless lives. Take Steve Harvey, a well-known TV host and comedian who faced many setbacks before his breakthrough. He has openly shared how trusting his own path, even when others doubted him, was essential. You've got to listen to your spirit and trust the process, even when it looks like failure, he once said. Isn't it ironic how those who appear strongest are often the ones who trust most deeply? And now, just like that, you've moved out of their emotional jurisdiction. They can't access you through the same doors anymore. You're no longer operating on survival scripts. You've switched systems. You're living from spiritual software now. To them, you've become difficult. But in reality, you've just become discerning. You're not easily accessed. You're not easily moved. You're not easily tricked into making yourself smaller for anyone's convenience. Let your yes be yes and your no, no. Matthew 5:37. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. Galatians 5:1. So what does it truly look like to live from spiritual software rather than survival scripts? How does it feel to walk in freedom instead of chains? You've stepped off the linear grid. You've moved into something quantum, a sacred dimension where intuition leads, boundaries hold, and presence speaks louder than performance. This way of being baffles people who rely on predictability and emotional leverage. They can't navigate you anymore, not because you're cruel, but because you're no longer available for their version of connection, which was really just control in disguise. You're not mean, you're sovereign. You're not arrogant, you're in alignment. You don't belong to their old maps anymore. You're writing new ones in real time. And that terrifies the people who thought they had you figured out. So the question becomes, how long will you continue to let their expectations define you? When will you step fully into the authority that has always been yours? Now, you've become a living mystery, studied like a rare phenomenon because your frequency no longer matches anything familiar. It's as if you've stepped outside the bounds of what people thought possible. What is it about your presence that leaves them both fascinated and unsettled? Why does your calm glow disrupt their understanding of reality in such a profound way? You didn't announce your transformation with fanfare or loud declarations. Instead, you simply embodied it. One moment, you were stuck in the mud, barely surviving the chaos around you. Then, seemingly without warning, you were walking with a peace that defied explanation, glowing with clarity, and making moves that didn't add up according to their natural logic. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. Have you ever paused long enough to truly be still and sense the quiet power rising from within? If so, how does this stillness give you strength beyond what the world expects or understands? People watch you like a science experiment, analyzing your posture, your words, your silence, your very aura. It's clear now that your energy no longer reflects what they expect or understand. You didn't follow the traditional script. You didn't beg for a place at the table, nor did you campaign for recognition or wait for their approval. Instead, you vanished from their narrative and returned carrying an energy they can't trace or explain. How did you manage to do it without their validation? And how do you carry such peace when every piece of your past suggested you'd still be broken? Your aura is unreadable because it's no longer rooted in ego, but is coded with survival, soul refinement, and divine alignment. You stopped performing to fit expectations. You stopped leaking your precious energy into conversations that led nowhere. You stopped being emotionally available for narratives built on guilt and distortion. And now, all their old tactics, guilt trips, manipulation, attempts to control, bounce harmlessly off your renewed spirit. You're not just unrecognizable to them, you're truly untouchable. Consider Anderson Cooper, a respected journalist and television anchor who has faced immense personal challenges, including loss and health struggles, yet he continues to show up with integrity, authenticity, and an inner strength that defies public scrutiny. How often do we forget that true power comes from standing firmly in your truth, regardless of external pressures? What about someone like Mia, a single mother juggling 2 jobs, who quietly decided she would no longer be drained by toxic relationships or exhausting emotional obligations? She set clear boundaries, and her life slowly transformed as a result. Isn't it incredible how ordinary people just like you find extraordinary freedom when they finally say no to what doesn't serve their soul? Think about the mighty ocean tide that moves relentlessly, reshaping coastlines with gentle but unstoppable force. It doesn't roar for attention, yet its power is undeniable and ever-present. In many ways, doesn't your transformation echo this same natural persistence? How many waves of challenges have you faced only to return stronger, more grounded, and more certain in your path than before? Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. 2 Corinthians 3:17. Could it be that your quiet power is a reflection of divine protection, moving in ways unseen but deeply felt within your soul? You earned what they cannot buy or mimic, something cultivated in the quiet, in the shadows, during moments when no one was watching or acknowledging your struggle. And that, without a doubt, is your sacred power. This isn't just confidence. This is the energy of someone who has already stood before the highest court, the one within, and received a final ruling. The verdict is clear: not guilty. Not guilty of the lies projected onto you, not guilty of the roles they forced you to play, not guilty of the shame, the guilt, the blame, and the false narratives imposed on your story. Throughout your life, you've been on trial, judged, dissected, misread, but now the verdict is in, and you've been completely cleared. Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Romans 8:1. Have you truly allowed yourself to believe that your verdict has already been given by the one who matters most? What people are seeing now, and often mislabeling as arrogance, is actually your liberation. You're no longer walking around trying to prove your innocence. You're no longer shrinking yourself to avoid their judgment. Instead, you face the accusations that lived inside your mind, absorbed from others, and dismantled every one of them with truth. You've come to realize that you don't owe anyone an apology for being whole, for being wise, for surviving, and for evolving. And now you walk differently, not because you think you're better, but because you're no longer bowed down under invisible weights. You're not performing humility just to make others feel comfortable. You're not over-explaining your choices or overcompensating for how deeply you've healed. Is it really pride when you finally remembered who you are? Or is it restoration? This truth can offend those still trapped in emotional debt with themselves, people who never gave themselves permission to rise. So, they call your clarity cocky. They label your boundaries rude. They mistake your centeredness for superiority because they haven't yet experienced what it truly feels like to be free. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. And what happens when that truth is no longer just a concept, but the very ground you now walk on? Take someone like Trevor Noah, for example. Rising from a complex background, often misunderstood and stereotyped, he built a global voice, not by begging for acceptance, but by standing firmly in the truth of his experience, with humor, depth, and clarity. Was he arrogant for outgrowing what tried to limit him? Or did he simply refuse to stay confined in the courtroom built by others? Or think about Elena, a former caretaker who spent years neglecting her own dreams to meet everyone else's needs. The day she finally said, "No more," and started her own small design studio, not to prove anything, but simply because her soul longed for it. Everything changed. Now, some say she's distant or different, but what she really is free. And if you look to nature, consider the volcano, silent for decades, quietly building power beneath the surface, unnoticed by anyone, until it erupts, reshaping landscapes without asking permission or giving warnings. It simply expresses what had been true all along. Isn't that how inner authority works too? The truth is, many are still in court, still defending their worth, still hoping for a jury of people-pleasing validation or applause to set them free. But you fired the jury, you threw out the case, you walked out of that courtroom and never looked back. Because through Christ Jesus, the law of the Spirit who gives life has set you free from the law of sin and death. Romans 8:2. You are no longer held hostage by accusations, whether internal or external. You're free, and the verdict is final. And now, your very presence reminds them that freedom is possible, but it comes at a cost, something they're not yet ready to pay, the story of their suffering. So no, it's not just confidence, it's closure, it's completion, it's spiritual authority born from deep, lonely, invisible battles that no one clapped for. And those who misunderstand it, they are not your judge. They are simply witnesses to what it looks like when someone finally walks without chains. You outgrew environments where playing small was the unspoken social contract. You didn't just walk away from old environments, you expanded beyond them. You didn't slam doors or create drama. You simply stopped performing in places where the unspoken rule was, don't shine too brightly, don't speak too boldly, don't grow too fast. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Matthew 5:15. So why were you hiding your light for so long? When did you start believing that your brilliance was a threat rather than a gift? For a long time, you played along. You made yourself smaller so other people could feel big. You downplayed your gifts so you wouldn't intimidate the insecure. You watered yourself down, not because you lacked strength, but because you didn't want to make waves. Were you ever really at peace, or just quietly exhausted from performing smallness? What was the price you paid for being digestible? That wasn't humility, it was survival. But something shifted. You woke up to how much it was costing you to stay in rooms where your light had to be dimmed, just to be accepted. You began to realize that the so-called peace you were maintaining was really just quiet compliance. You were never truly free in those spaces. You were just tolerated as long as you stayed within the limits they set for you. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. John 8:36. Are you still carrying a yoke that Christ already broke off of you? The moment you started breaking those limits, the energy shifted. Now they say you've changed, but what they're really grieving is control. They're mourning their ability to predict you, to mold you, to keep you emotionally caged. They didn't love the real you. They loved the version of you that kept their insecurities unchallenged. Whose comfort did you protect at the expense of your calling? What does it cost your soul to keep being the easy one? You used to gaslight yourself just to keep them comfortable. Now you don't. That's what they're reacting to. Not betrayal, but liberation. What version of yourself did you have to bury so others wouldn't feel insecure? And who benefits from your silence? They're not uncomfortable because you're gone. They're uncomfortable because your freedom reminds them that they're still choosing captivity. Are you shrinking just so no one else has to grow? What if your boldness is the invitation they need to break free too? You didn't leave anyone behind. You just stopped crawling to stay in places where you were meant to fly. When did you first clip your own wings for the sake of staying close to the ground? And who told you flight was selfish? Consider someone like Shonda Rhimes. For years, she operated quietly behind the scenes, making others shine. But when she stepped into the full power of her creativity, telling bold, diverse, and challenging stories, she redefined television. She didn't ask permission to expand, she simply stopped shrinking. Or take Mateo, a quiet man who worked in his family's auto shop for years. He always loved photography, but was told it was a hobby, not a career. At 38, he moved to another city and started capturing street life with soul. And now, even if he's not famous, his photos speak volumes. He no longer apologizes for wanting more than what was handed to him. Was that betrayal, or was it obedience to his gift? Even nature speaks. Look at how diamonds form, not with applause but under pressure, in darkness, over time. No one sees it coming, until suddenly it's undeniable. What beauty in you has been quietly forming under pressure? You didn't cut people off. Instead, you grew to a place where their access expired. The version of you that needed approval doesn't exist anymore. And without that version, the social contract is void. You're not arrogant, you're not cruel, you're simply clear. What if your clarity isn't the threat, they just preferred your confusion? Clarity terrifies people who rely on your confusion to maintain their comfort. So let me ask you again, who still has access to the version of you that no longer lives? What chains are you keeping alive just because they feel familiar? You're not shrinking anymore, and that alone is the loudest statement you'll ever make. And now comes the deeper realization. The version of you they say they miss never really existed. It was a survival program. Have you ever asked yourself, who was I before fear told me to shrink? They don't miss you. They miss their influence. They miss the version who bent without resistance, who smiled through discomfort, who swallowed truth to keep the room calm and others unchallenged. But that version, that wasn't the real you. That was a mask stitched together by fear and necessity, a role rehearsed to perfection because not being agreeable felt dangerous, because honesty felt like a risk you couldn't afford. And have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its creator. Colossians 3:10. When was the last time you truly renewed your mind instead of conforming to others' expectations? You didn't choose to be that quiet. You were trained to be, trained to read the room like a map of emotional landmines, to sense when others needed comfort, even if it cost you your clarity, to adjust, appease, and dilute your power until no one felt confronted. What they called easygoing was your nervous system in a permanent state of tension. What they praised as sweet was you calculating every word, terrified that the truth might trigger disapproval or chaos. Have you ever noticed how a chameleon changes its colors to survive? You adapted just like that, blending in so you wouldn't be seen as a threat. But at what cost to your true colors? For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Galatians 1:10. Whose approval are you living for today? You didn't have the luxury of being misunderstood. You had to get it right just to stay safe. So you performed. You played the version they could handle, even as it cost you the parts of yourself that were crying to be known. Think about Peter, a team member who always avoided speaking up during meetings. Peter kept quiet, not because he lacked ideas, but because he feared upsetting the group dynamics. Over time, this cost him confidence and a sense of purpose, until he realized he needed to assert his voice to contribute authentically and grow. But now that you've stopped doing that, now that you've begun deconstructing the machinery of emotional compliance, they're not heartbroken over you. They're grieving the access they once had. Take the example of Malala Yousafzai, who refused to stay in the silence others demanded. Her voice became unstoppable, and now many feel unsettled because they no longer hold power over her. They lost access to your silence. They lost access to your emotional labor. They lost access to the version of you that kept their world tidy by disowning your own. And the truth is, they're not mourning you. They're mourning the atmosphere you once maintained, the emotional cushion you used to be. They're mourning their comfort, not your presence. Look around at the seasons changing. The trees don't cling to their old leaves. They let go to grow anew. So, what old leaves are you still holding on to? What comfort are you reluctant to release? Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. Isaiah 43:18. What former things is God calling you to leave behind today? So, what happens when you finally stop playing their part? When you refuse to dim your light or soften your truth just to make others comfortable? Who do you become when you no longer ask permission to exist fully? What they miss is the submission they mistook for kindness. But were you ever truly agreeing with them? Or were you simply surviving? You weren't choosing peace, you were avoiding punishment. Was that really a relationship, or just a one-sided contract written in your silence? Now you speak up. Now you pause before agreeing. Now you say no without guilt. And they call it an attitude shift, a glow-up, a change. But really, isn't it a return to your original self before the world told you who you needed to be in order to be safe? You're not mean now. You're just no longer available for emotional negotiations that require your betrayal. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners. Isaiah 61:1. They didn't love the real you. They loved how well you disappeared. Have you ever wondered why your boundaries shake others? Could it be because your freedom is a mirror reflecting their own chains? As Psalm 34:18 reminds us, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. What does it mean for you to walk in truth, even if it makes others uncomfortable? Take Sarah, a woman from everyday life who used to always say yes to keep the peace, swallowing her own needs and desires for the comfort of others. How often do we do the same? But when Sarah began to say no with quiet conviction, honoring her boundaries without guilt, how did those around her respond? Some felt uneasy, others respected her strength. Yet Sarah found a deep freedom she had never known. Could your no be the start of your own liberation? Look at Taylor Swift, the global superstar who once conformed to the music industry's expectations and public opinion. How often do we, like Taylor, feel pressured to fit into roles assigned by others? Yet, at some point, she stopped playing those roles. She reclaimed her voice, her music, and her narrative. This powerful choice invites us to reflect. How does her journey inspire you to take back your own story? Isaiah 41:10 encourages us with these words. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. How can you find courage and strength in that promise today? Or consider the natural world, the river that carves its own path through solid rock, not by force, but by persistent presence. In the same way, are you flowing steadily toward your purpose, no matter the obstacles you face? Imagine the changes that could come if you trusted your inner current as unwaveringly as that river does. And the most liberating part? You don't need to explain this journey to anyone, because the real you was never lost. It was simply waiting for the performance to end. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight." Could surrendering to that divine guidance be your path to true freedom? What new freedom might await on the other side of your no? You're not lost, you've just shifted altitudes. When your spirit begins operating from a higher frequency, the language of the lower no longer resonates. What once felt urgent now seems distracting. What once consumed your attention now barely echoes in your awareness. You're not avoiding life, you're attuning to a different signal altogether. Have you noticed how your silence has started to speak louder than your explanations? How your pause unsettles more than your reaction ever did? Perhaps your restraint has become your form of resistance. That's not distance, that's discernment. You're listening for instruction, not validation. As Isaiah 30:21 declares, "Your ears will hear a word behind you, saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.' When you turn to the right or when you turn to the left, you've learned to hear that voice and to obey it, even when it leads you away from what's familiar and comfortable." People may say, "You've changed," but what they really mean is that they can no longer predict you. You're no longer running on public opinion. You're not measuring yourself by other people's mirrors. So, what if your transformation isn't rejection but realignment? What if your peace is the loudest protest against chaos? You're moving with the quiet confidence of someone who has sat with the divine and returned whole. At this point, you're no longer interested in being understood by those who refuse to understand themselves. Think about Julia Child, who didn't even learn to cook until her late 30s, facing skepticism, rejection, and a male-dominated culinary world. Yet she never asked for permission. She studied, practiced, and persisted. Her unapologetic passion needed no applause to be real. Her journey wasn't fast, but it was faithful. She didn't fit the mold, she remade it. Even the sunflower knows to turn its face toward the sun. It doesn't justify it, it just does it, because alignment is more essential than approval. So why do we think we need permission to do the same? Philippians 4:6-7 reminds us, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." You're no longer conforming, you're transforming. So the question now isn't, will they understand me? But, am I listening to the one who called me? You're not above anyone. You're simply no longer beneath yourself. And that in itself is a holy return. They don't realize it, but when they say you've changed, what they really mean is, you've evolved past our comprehension. Your growth disrupted their system. Have you noticed how some expect you to stay the same, to fit neatly into their familiar box? Why is it so hard for them to accept your evolution? You no longer register on the emotional frequencies they use to reach you through shame, guilt, peer pressure, fear of loneliness. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." What if your spirit is whispering to break free from those chains? Are you listening? You've outgrown those access points. You've become spiritually encrypted. Look at Beyoncé, who transformed from a pop star into a cultural icon, leading with authenticity, refusing to be boxed in by others' expectations. Like her, how can you lead with your true self, beyond the noise of judgment? You're not invisible because you disappeared. You're invisible because your vibration changed. They can't find you on the same frequency bands they used to scan. They're searching for a signal that no longer exists because you upgraded the entire motherboard of your being. Consider Maria, a single mother who once stayed quiet at community meetings to avoid conflict, but now speaks up passionately to advocate for her children's future. How did she find the courage to shed fear and embrace her voice? Could you do the same? John 1:5 assures us, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." What light inside you refuses to be dimmed? Even nature shows us the phoenix tree, which sheds its old bark yearly, revealing fresh, vibrant layers beneath. It doesn't cling to the past, it renews itself in cycles, a perfect symbol of your spiritual evolution. What parts of your life are ready to be shed like old bark? Are you ready for that renewal? And it's not about being better, it's about finally being in alignment. Matthew 6:33 encourages, "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." Are you seeking what truly aligns with your soul, beyond external validation? You're not running from the world. You're moving in sync with something beyond it. Colossians 3:2 says, "Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things." What if your mind and heart were tuned to a higher frequency right now? What would that change for you? So, no, you're not lost. You're just no longer traceable by systems designed to control rather than understand. And maybe that's the clearest sign of your freedom yet. What freedom are you holding back because others expect you to stay the same? When will you choose to live fully in your true frequency? There's a reason your peace looks suspicious to those who can't function without chaos. Have you ever wondered why your silence unsettles them more than your presence ever did? Your peace doesn't look like surrender, it looks like rebellion to those addicted to noise, to those who measure aliveness by how frantic life feels, to those who believe chaos is a personality trait and drama the heartbeat of connection. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Matthew 5:9. So why does your peace feel like a threat? Could it be because you've stopped mirroring their internal war? When you stopped reacting, when you refused to jump into every argument, every guilt trip, every emotional trap, they didn't see healing. They saw offense. They saw distance. They saw danger. They confuse peace with punishment because, in their world, quiet has always meant the storm is coming. But what if, in your world, peace is the storm that clears the room? To those who only know how to function in dysfunction, your calm is suspicious. Your silence makes them restless, not because you're cold, but because they don't know how to exist without conflict. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Psalm 37:7. When was the last time they were still enough to hear something deeper than their own panic? Take Keanu Reeves, for example. Known for his quiet strength and emotional steadiness in an industry addicted to attention and drama, he's often labeled mysterious or distant. But what if, like you, he simply found peace that doesn't demand to be loud? Or consider Angela, a barista who once engaged in every customer's emotional storm, over-apologizing, over-explaining, over-extending. Now she smiles quietly, sets clear boundaries, and lets the energy pass. Some regulars don't like it, but her peace, it's finally her own. Even nature echoes this truth. The alpine lake, still and mirror-like at sunrise, is often mistaken for emptiness by those who only appreciate rushing rivers and crashing waves. But its depth, silence, and reflection hold more life than meets the eye. Could your peace be like that lake, still, powerful, whole? You're not disengaged. You're simply no longer available for conversations that circle endlessly, for apologies that never lead to change, for emotional ping-pong matches designed to drain you. Do not cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you. Matthew 7:6. Are you finally recognizing the worth of your energy, your time, your healing? You're not here to fix what doesn't want healing. You're not here to perform emotional CPR on people committed to staying unconscious. So ask yourself, whose chaos have you mistaken for connection? Whose drama have you called love? Whose noise have you allowed to drown out your clarity? What if your calm isn't withdrawal, but a calling? Here's what they don't understand. Your silence isn't withdrawal. It's a return to the sanctuary within you that they never knew existed. They don't realize you're not ignoring them out of spite. You're simply no longer available for cycles that dishonor your peace. They once mistook your presence for permission. Now that you've stopped responding, they feel abandoned. But really, you've reclaimed yourself. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. And that's exactly what you did. You came to the place of rest, and with it came your boundaries, your vision, your walk. They ask, why are you so distant now? But maybe the better question is, why did they only feel close when you were erasing yourself to keep the peace? Why did your silence have to mean submission instead of self-respect? What kind of connection requires your self-abandonment just to function? Take Claire, for example. She was the nice one, always the buffer, the emotional airbag in every explosion. People praised her calm, but no one asked what it cost her to maintain it. Until one day, she stopped. She stopped apologizing for needing space. She stopped rescuing people from fires they set themselves. And when she did, the silence around her was louder than any scream. But in that silence, she finally heard herself. Have you ever paused long enough to hear your own truth beneath all the noise? What if your silence isn't absence of love, but presence of clarity? Then there's Anthony Bourdain, a brilliant mind, a world traveler, a man who once lived in extremes of chaos, addiction, and performance. Yet, in his later years, something shifted. He began speaking about authenticity, simplicity, and finding joy in raw, unpolished human experience. He stopped chasing applause and started chasing presence. Many didn't understand the change, but he wasn't disappearing. He was finally becoming visible to himself. And though his journey ended tragically, it revealed something sacred. Even the loudest souls long for stillness. Have you noticed how the sea is often at its most powerful when it's calm? Still waters don't mean absence of movement, they mean depth. Be still before the Lord, all mankind, because he has roused himself from his holy dwelling. Zechariah 2:13. Is your stillness evidence of your authority? Could your calm be more radical than any argument you've ever had? Like a hawk learning to ride the wind instead of flapping to exhaustion, you rose. And now, you no longer hear the chaos from below, not because it's gone, but because your altitude has changed. You ask different questions now, not will they approve, but will I be at peace with God if I betray myself? Not will they leave if I say no, but why do I keep inviting storms into places I've already cleaned? And deeper still, what am I sacrificing every time I shrink to soothe someone else's insecurity? They say you've changed, but maybe what they're really saying is your update disrupted our control, and it did, because you're no longer living in response to dysfunction. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. Isaiah 26:3. So let them call it exile, let them call it arrogance, but what if it's freedom? What if you were never meant to be understood by those still invested in your confusion? You know it's alignment, and alignment doesn't need to shout. It just walks, quietly, powerfully, and free. You're not rebranding, you're reclaiming. After all the noise, the chaos, and the exhausting performances, what if this moment isn't about becoming someone new, but about coming back to yourself? In other words, you're not putting on a new mask. You're finally peeling off the old ones. Have you ever wondered how many layers you've hidden beneath just to survive? This isn't a glossy rebrand designed to impress or appease anyone else. Rather, this is a sacred reclamation, a return to the parts of you buried under shame, silence, and generations of unspoken burdens. For I will restore health to you, and your wounds I will heal, declares the Lord. Jeremiah 30:17. Isn't this what healing truly feels like? Not a fresh start, but a restoration of what was always meant to be. Think about J.K. Rowling, once a struggling single mother facing rejection after rejection, yet she reclaimed her passion for storytelling and transformed her life through her authentic voice. How many times have you felt on the edge, only to find that your true self was waiting quietly beneath the struggle? The version they see now isn't the new you, it's the original you, returning from exile. How many times did you say yes when your soul screamed no? How many times did you silence your voice just to keep the peace? How long did you shrink yourself to fit inside their limits? Consider Lisa, a school teacher in your community who for years prioritized everyone's needs but her own. One day, she decided to reclaim her dreams of writing and personal growth, showing us that reclaiming your true self is possible no matter where you start. Could your story be just as transformative? You weren't really living, you were surviving, wearing roles, performing for the comfort of others, sacrificing your own wholeness for their ease. Have you ever asked yourself, whose life were you really living? But now something has shifted, not from anger, but from awakening. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. Your broken pieces are being gathered. Your silenced voice is returning. The dreams you buried are rising again. And instead of shaping your life around being acceptable, you're building it around being aligned. Imagine the sunflower turning steadily toward the sun each day, unbothered by shadows or storms, trusting the light that sustains it. Like the sunflower, are you willing to seek what nourishes your soul above all else? Is it really ego, or is it the quiet strength of someone finally free? Is it arrogance or clarity born from survival and truth? For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Psalm 139:13-14. What if this is not rebellion but obedience? What if your journey back to yourself is exactly what freedom looks like? This is not a performance anymore. This is remembrance. This is restoration. They think it's just a phase. They call it ego. They whisper that you're trying to be something you're not, but they're wrong. You're not performing, you're remembering. What you're remembering unnerves those who have made peace with forgetting themselves. So what happens when your remembrance of who you truly are exposes their willingness to forget who they were always meant to be? You didn't elevate yourself to impress others. You elevated because staying stuck became too costly. As it says, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal. Philippians 3:13-14. You're not chasing fleeting aesthetics. You're chasing integration. You're not showing off. You're showing up, fully, finally, and unapologetically. Where does your glow come from? Is it approval or alignment? Your glow doesn't come from trends or external validation. It comes from truth. Take Emma Watson, for example. She once said that becoming herself meant breaking free from the expectations tied to being Hermione forever. She walked away from public pressure, not because she was lost, but because she was reclaiming the parts of herself buried beneath performance. And truth is magnetic to those who are aligned, yet threatening to the spiritually bankrupt. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters. Colossians 3:23. That's why some people treat your growth like it's violence. They feel exposed by your wholeness, because it highlights their own avoidance. They call your healing arrogance because it means they can no longer control you through your wounds. But can they still hold sway over someone who no longer bleeds for their comfort? Consider Lily, a single mother of 2, who used to shapeshift in every relationship just to avoid abandonment. One day, she stopped apologizing for her boundaries. She chose therapy over toxic loyalty, silence over pointless arguments. Her peace became her rebellion, and people called her cold. But she wasn't cold. She was finally warm with herself. You're not rebranding, you're restoring. You're not seeking applause, you're walking in authority. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:9. And the reason they can't handle you now, it's because you're no longer playing a role in their story. You're writing your own. Even in nature, a snake must shed its skin when it no longer fits. This is not punishment, it's necessary. The old skin doesn't simply fall off. The snake must press through friction and discomfort to step into its next stage. Is the snake being dramatic, or is it simply obeying the law of growth? And this time, you're the author, not the actor. When you start shedding what no longer serves you, you become a mirror reflecting what others have chosen to avoid. So, what parts of yourself have you been afraid to reveal? And who do you see reflected back when you stand fully in your truth? Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor. Ephesians 4:25. Are you ready to live in that kind of truth, even when it feels risky? Your evolution didn't make you a threat. Instead, it made you a mirror. Not the kind admired for beauty or charm, but the kind that shows everything they've been trying to outrun. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? Luke 6:41. How often do we judge others while ignoring our own flaws? Can we hold our own mirror with grace before pointing fingers? You didn't provoke them. You didn't insult them. You simply became clear, and that clarity made you a living truth detector. By existing in your authenticity, you expose what they've buried deep inside. Consider LeBron James on the basketball court. His discipline and excellence shine so brightly that it challenges others to face their own lack of effort. He doesn't attack, he simply shows what's possible. When has someone else's success made you reflect on your own path? Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. Proverbs 27:17. Who are the irons sharpening your life today? People don't always hate you for who you are. They hate how you make them feel about themselves. Your presence reminds them of the work they've neglected, the healing they avoided, the standards they lowered. Think about John, a quiet office worker who after years of people-pleasing began to say no and set boundaries. His newfound calm unsettled his co-workers, not because he changed, but because they were forced to face their own resistance to change. What changes have you made that caused discomfort in those around you? A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Proverbs 15:1. How can your calm be a source of peace rather than conflict? Even in nature, the firefly shines its light in the darkness, revealing paths and shadows alike. It doesn't choose to expose the dark, it just fulfills its purpose. Are you ready to let your light shine, even if it uncovers what others try to hide? You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Matthew 5:14. How brightly is your light shining today? That light doesn't ask for permission or questions. It simply reveals. You never demanded others change, but when you started living with integrity, they felt judged by the contrast. You became living proof of what's possible, and that terrifies those who believe survival is all they can hope for. Be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Ephesians 4:23-24. Are you embracing that transformation even when it asks you to step beyond your comfort zone? So tell me, are you ready to hold that mirror steady even when others look away? Are you willing to stand firm in your truth when the world prefers shadows? You started choosing peace over performance, boundaries over approval, inner truth over outer applause. And in doing so, you broke something in the illusion they were clinging to. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. Isaiah 41:10. When fear whispers to you, do you remember that God's strength is your anchor? It wasn't about you being better. It was about you being braver. Braver than the version of them that gave up a long time ago. Take Serena Williams, for example. She faced relentless criticism, yet chose to rise, not to please the crowd, but to honor her own spirit. How often do we mistake bravery for arrogance? That's why they call you intense, why they gossip, why they distance themselves. Because when you speak your truth without bitterness, when you smile without needing validation, when you walk away without explanation, they realize they're still negotiating with people you've already outgrown. They're trying to control a soul that's already free. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Psalm 27:1. So, what holds you back from shining fully? Think about David, a small-town nurse who learned to say no after years of people-pleasing. His new calm unsettled his friends because it forced them to confront their own discomfort with change. When was the last time your growth challenged someone else? You're not triggering them. They've been triggered for years. You just happen to be the one showing them that their mask is slipping. You became the unspoken question, why haven't you faced yourself yet? And most people would rather resent the mirror than do the hard inner work. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Psalm 51, verse 10. Will you allow your heart to be renewed, even if it means discomfort? Look at the moon. It doesn't force the sea, yet it moves oceans. Quietly, rhythmically, unshakably, it reveals hidden tides and shifts the entire coastline in silence. Are you ready to become that quiet force, shaping your life with inner gravity? But here's the truth. That's not your burden to carry. You're not here to make others comfortable in their denial. You're here to reflect what's real. And that's not arrogance, it's alignment. But when you stop dimming your light to keep others comfortable, something profound begins to shift. Your authority is quiet, yet it's making noise in the spirit realm. This authority doesn't come with a spotlight, a crowd, or a title. And yet, it's shaking things at the root. You don't need to announce your power, because your presence has become the announcement. But let the one who boasts boast about this, that they have the understanding to know me. Jeremiah 9:24. So when the world demands performance, can you rest in knowing that your authority comes from God, not applause? You've entered a timeline where your life speaks louder than any speech ever could. The way you move, decide, detach, and protect your peace. It's all a frequency now, a vibration that the spiritual realm responds to before you even open your mouth. What does your presence say before you even speak? What energy are you carrying into the spaces you enter? Who are you when no one is watching? You're not just walking differently, you're walking with permission from the divine. And that's what changes everything. Consider actor Zendaya, who doesn't chase headlines or drama, yet carries a quiet, radiant confidence that shifts every room she enters. She doesn't have to shout. Her alignment speaks volumes. When was the last time your stillness made more impact than your words? Are you ready to stop chasing noise and start embodying truth? The old version of you was waiting to be picked, chosen, validated. But that version died quietly the moment you realized the throne wasn't out there, it was inside. The kingdom of God is within you. Luke 17:21. Have you been looking for authority in the wrong places? You stopped asking to sit at tables where your spirit never fit. Instead, you built your own, with contracts written in truth, not trauma. Think of Daniel, a retired school janitor who started volunteering at a youth center. No one asked him to show up with wisdom, consistency, and kindness, but his presence began transforming young lives simply because he walked in quiet purpose. So, what tables have you outgrown, and what new ones are you being called to create? Where are you being invited to show up? Not louder, but deeper. Many people think silence means you've stepped back, but in the spiritual realm, your silence is strategy, it's declaration, it's proof that you don't have to beg or prove anymore. Even the trees understand this. They grow in silence, rooted and reaching toward the light, year after year. No permission, no performance. What are you becoming in the quiet that no one sees yet? What if the invisible work is the most sacred of all? Your alignment is your authority. In returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and trust shall be your strength. Isaiah 30:15. Could it be that your stillness is your strength? Have you learned to trust the stillness as deeply as the movement? And when you speak now, it's not from ego, it's from divine jurisdiction. So let them wonder, let them misinterpret the silence. You know who authorized your voice, and heaven already heard you. You're not trying to be heard, you already are. By forces most people don't even believe in. Your choices are no longer based on reactions, they're based on vision, on codes only your spirit can interpret. Call to me and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know. Jeremiah 33:3. Have you started to trust the answers that don't come through words but through knowing? And when you say no now, it's not rebellion, it's protection. When you disappear, it's not withdrawal, it's recalibration. What are you protecting when you say no? What might you reclaim by withdrawing from what no longer aligns with your soul? The spirit realm recognizes it. That's why things start shifting behind the scenes when you take action. Why doors open without you knocking. Why some people exit your life without warning. It's not rejection, it's spiritual housekeeping. Every plant that my Heavenly Father has not planted will be pulled up by the roots. Matthew 15:13. Could the endings you fear actually be divine pruning, just like Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison, not wasting away, but realigning with a calling far beyond what anyone expected? When he emerged, he didn't need to explain himself. His presence was the announcement. Or like Emily, a single mother of 3 who stopped attending every draining family gathering just to avoid gossip. At first they said she was cold, but over time they realized she was becoming whole. Her no wasn't rejection, it was rebirth. Even the butterfly disappears into the cocoon, hidden, silent, uncelebrated, only to emerge with wings no one saw coming. What are you still calling a breakdown when it may actually be your breakthrough in disguise? The unseen world is responding to the rank you now carry. You don't need applause. You don't need a crowd. You don't even need to be understood. Are you still chasing validation from people who don't speak the same spiritual language as you? Can you rest in the truth that some victories are invisible, but no less real? Because what's happening is bigger than visibility. It's about vibration, and your frequency no longer plays in the background. It's center stage in the places that matter most, where angels move, contract, shift, and unseen battles are being won in your favor. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers. Ephesians 6:12. What spiritual battles are you winning simply by standing in alignment? That's real authority. Quiet to the world, thunderous in the spirit. So now, when they whisper, "You've changed," let them. That statement isn't an accusation, it's an unintended confirmation. What if their discomfort is the evidence of your deliverance? How many masks did you wear, just to be accepted in rooms you've now outgrown. It means the spell is broken, the mask is gone, the performance has ended. You didn't just change, you returned. And I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten. Joel 2:25. What parts of yourself are being restored that you thought were lost forever? You didn't rise to impress the world. You resurrected to reclaim what the world tried to bury. You stopped asking for permission from broken systems. You stopped watering dead soil just to prove your loyalty. And you stopped shrinking to fit rooms that required your silence to feel safe. So now ask yourself, where are you being called to expand, even if doing so offends those who preferred your smallness? And who might you become when you finally stop negotiating with your own power? Pause and reflect deeply on these questions, for they hold the key to your next level of growth. That withdrawal of consent, that quiet, unwavering refusal to betray yourself ever again, marks the very place where your new authority was born. It is in this moment of inner conviction that true power begins to take root. Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? 1 Corinthians 3:16. Have you fully embraced this truth, recognizing that you are a temple, sacred and untouchable? Consider how often you consciously protect your spirit as you would a holy place, guarding it from intrusion, from compromise. Let them speculate, let them talk. They are not witnessing your downfall, rather they are bearing witness to your upgrade. Your stillness is not passivity. Your detachment is not bitterness. Your glow is not arrogance. Instead, all these signs point to a profound shift. You have stepped into spiritual governance. You have signed soul-level contracts now, ones not written in ink, but inscribed in frequency. Think of Fred Rogers, a man who chose kindness and calm in a turbulent media world. His gentle voice and steady presence shaped generations, not by shouting the loudest, but by speaking truth with love and integrity. He never performed for applause. He embodied authenticity even when the world around him was chaotic. So, ask yourself, are you ready to embody your truth, even when the world around you is noisy and chaotic? You have exited timelines that relied on your confusion to survive. You didn't just move differently, you moved higher. Consider Anna, a mid-level manager who used to overwork, overgive, and over-explain just to be seen. One day, she simply stopped. She left meetings she once tolerated, declined tasks she once absorbed, and quietly watched as those who benefited from her confusion faded away. What she lost in approval, she gained in clarity. Now reflect, what timelines are you still fueling by holding on to confusion or trying to please others? This shift you are making is not merely personal, it is prophetic. You have become a living contradiction to every narrative that said you wouldn't make it without playing small. Even in nature, the eagle doesn't flap around to prove its power. It rises effortlessly on thermals while others remain grounded, caught in the noise. Could your elevation be just as effortless as the eagle's flight? If only you trusted the currents beneath you. This is a spiritual interruption to every lie that claimed your power came from performance. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Jeremiah 1:5. Have you remembered the original plan God had for you, even before the world tried to define your worth? This isn't a phase, it's a divine reintroduction. So walk in your clarity, walk in your verdict, walk in your quiet thunder. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. What battles can you win today by simply trusting and being still? You don't need to explain a frequency they were never tuned into. Let your life be the sermon, your peace be the protest, and your wholeness be the proof. You're not becoming, you've arrived, and every dimension knows it. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Ephesians 2:10. Are you ready to walk fully into the purpose for which you were created? Being God's chosen one means stepping into a new timeline, a timeline not shaped by the world's chaos or approval, but by divine authority and spiritual alignment. This is not merely a change, it is a profound return to your true self, the original version God designed with purpose and power. While this transformation may unsettle others around you, it remains your sacred calling to walk boldly in the peace, boundaries, and truth that now define who you are. So ask yourself, are you ready to embrace this new authority fully? To live out the prophetic purpose written deep within your spirit and impact the unseen realm with your clarity and peace? Keep close to heart the words from Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Your transformation is far greater than a personal journey. It is a spiritual revolution. If this message has spoken to your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and comment below. Join our growing community by subscribing, so together we can encourage one another to walk in alignment and divine authority. Whether you support us through super thanks or simply by being here, know that your presence is a blessing and your growth inspires us all. May God's peace guard your heart, His wisdom guide your steps, and His power uphold your authority. Walk confidently, knowing that you are deeply loved, divinely chosen, and truly unstoppable. Be blessed, be bold, and be aligned.